Welcome to r/slash Prorevenge, where a scummy manager gets a taste of Kentucky Fried Justice. Our next Reddit post is from Ambulance Driver. Entirely too many years ago, I started to work at KFC. KFC wasn't a bad job. I was 16, and the assistant manager at that location was my best friend's stepdad. So we took what was tedious and menial and tried to make it fun. He was actually a really good manager, and genuinely cared about the people who worked for him. We would do silly stuff before the store opened while we were doing prep. He would have music playing loudly from his office as long as everything got done and done well. He really didn't care if we had fun doing it. We'll call him Larry. This story is not about Larry though. This story is about our store manager, Tim. Tim was the exact opposite of our assistant manager. Everything had to be taken seriously. Fun was outlawed. I genuinely hated working with Tim. Tim was an egocentric, power-hungry, petty little man with delusions of grandeur because he was a manager for KFC. Tim's approach to managing was to work the employee until they burned out. When they did, fire them and hire someone else. Needless to say, morale when Tim worked was in the garbage. Tim hated that crews would prefer working with Larry instead of him. He hated that crews had fun when Larry was working. He hated that the store's numbers were always better when Larry worked. Mostly, he hated everyone. But the one thing he absolutely hated was a silly little thing that Larry did. If it was before the restaurant opened, Larry would stick his tongue between his teeth and lower lip and shout out, "Hi, coworker," to whatever employee had just walked in. It sounded absolutely ridiculous. I would always do the same thing back, which ended up sounding something like, "Hi, Daddy." A perfect example of what a butthole Tim was is this. There was a young woman who, due to a variety of stressors, attempted to end her life after a particularly grueling shift working with Tim. After she had recovered, she came back for her last paycheck, and Larry was working. That was not a coincidence. She called the store to find out what day he was working. So Larry sat her down out in the lobby, brought her lunch, brought her last checkout, and sat and talked with her for about an hour. It was after the lunch rush, so he had the time. He made sure she was doing okay now, talked about whatever she wanted to talk about. By the time she left, she was smiling but had tears on her cheeks. She had never had someone just sit and listen and let her talk out everything that was going on. Well, the next day, Tim came in and hauled Larry into his office. His words were, "The next time Suicide Queen comes in, tell her to do it right next time." So now you have a clear picture of exactly how petty and vindictive this little man was. Here's where the revenge starts. We were scheduled to have the regional and national bigwigs for KFC come through our area for an annual inspection. Tim had his eyes set on being one of those bigwigs, at least for the region. Why wouldn't he be? He did everything by the book. That automatically made him a good manager, at least in his eyes. Everything had a checklist and a procedure and a set of written instructions in the book. And if you couldn't meet the expectations set forth in the book, well, Tim would yell at you and berate you because that's how managers manage, you see. Well, before the bigwigs got to our store, we knew what day they'd be coming. Several of us had agreed that on the day they came through, we would all screw up just enough to get Tim to blow his cool. Because our regional manager and the national bigwigs all believed that KFC was a family company and that employees were valuable team members. The day in question arrived, and the bigwigs were there for a big tour. Whoops, one of the flyers had the oil replaced last night. Oh look, the shaker table hadn't been cleaned. Darn it, we've got way too much coleslaw made, and we won't get through it before we have to toss it. Oh no, we don't have enough chicken in the cooker to fulfill the lunch rush. Oh man, someone forgot to preheat the second cooker. You get the picture. So after I took a minute too long to get a basket of chicken into the cooker for the second time, Tim absolutely lost his mind. Yelling, cursing, throwing things. He actually physically pushed me away from the breading station in the middle of the lunch rush. While the regional manager and several bigwigs from National stood there, while we had a line several people deep at both cash registers, and a lobby full of people eating, Tim stood there, gulping like a fish. His mouth was moving like he was trying to say something, but no sounds were coming out. The room was absolutely quiet, other than the beeping of a fryer that was done. I looked at Tim. This was the moment that we'd all been gearing up for. I looked down at where he had pushed me, a set of handprints in flour on my chest. And I cut loose into him, yelled at him that I quit, took off my apron, and threw it at him. I told him I was tired of his abuse, of his poor management, of how he single-handedly drove morale through the floor every time he walked through the doors. How he was a terrible excuse for a manager, and that if he didn't have Larry and a couple of good shift leads, he'd have driven this location out of business a long time ago. All the color drained from his face, and he bolted to the office cube. The national and regional folks ended up comping everyone's meals that were in the restaurant. Interestingly enough, Tim was not fired, but he was demoted to assistant manager. Larry was promoted to manager. About 10 years later, I was working at my current job as an EMT. We had just dropped a patient off at the hospital that was across from the street from that same restaurant, and my partner was hungry. So we drove across the street and pulled in. Now, I hadn't set foot in that restaurant since the day I'd quit. But lo and behold, who's working the counter but Tim himself? And his name tag still shows assistant manager. The restaurant was empty since it was between lunch and dinner time, and I just couldn't help myself. I stuck my tongue between my teeth and lower lip and, as loud as I could, shouted, "Hi, Tim!" I haven't been back there since, but that was around 12 years ago. I'm willing to bet he's still just the assistant manager there. Decent story, and a quick question for you guys. If any of you tried that at home by putting your tongue between your lower lip and your lower teeth and saying something, let me know by hitting the like button. Our next Reddit post is from Restaurant Throwaway. The time a coworker stole my tip. This coworker in question was a pain in the butt, but she was a decent server and she did her side work, so whatever. So this girl wanted to leave early one night. She had one table left and asked me to take them because they'd be camping out for a while. I too had one table left and was just finishing up. So I said that I'd take them if she didn't cash them out first. I wasn't going to stay on the clock and make $0 extra and clean her section. She threw an absolute fit, but eventually transferred the table. Now, I don't know why she transferred them because she stayed the whole time they were there. She walked around the whole restaurant and bar, trashing me to anyone who would listen. When it came time to cash them out, she went to the table and said something to them while I was running their cards and making change. I handed them their slips and cash to the one guy who paid in cash. Someone at the table said, "I don't know what you did to that girl, but she told us not to tip you." I said, I think she's just having a bad night. I thanked them for coming in and wished them a good night. I went to the register and started entering tips while I waited for them to leave. I was fuming, but the table was happy with me, so I wasn't going to let it get to me. As soon as they left the table, my pain-in-the-butt coworker slides into the seat. I was like, huh? So I hustle down there and I can see her looking at the slips. When I get to the table, she's getting up, and she has the $4 cash tip in her hand. Now, everyone at the table left me a 20% tip, except for the cash guy who left me nothing, on a $20 check. So 20% of a $20 bill means that's my $4 tip. It was at that point that I lost my cool. I asked her if she took money off the table. I'd like to say that I was calm and collected, but I'm sure that I wasn't. She runs screaming to the manager that I accused her of stealing. I explained the whole situation to the manager, who I'm sure will see reason. He opts to check the security footage, but no, the recording wasn't working. So now it's my word versus hers, which should be a slam dunk in my favor, but what can they really do? If they fire her for cause, they need proof. And I didn't actually see her take the money, just holding $4 in her hand as she left the table. Okay, you won the battle, but you'll lose the war. Now, here comes the really messed up part. My next shift, the regional manager comes in to talk to me about the whole situation. She acknowledges that she believes me, but there's nothing she can do about it. And then she instructs me to apologize to her. Ha! Fat chance! I agreed to do it, but obviously never did. Well, it was around that point that I moved to the bar full time. I had several weapons of revenge at my disposal, but the best one in my arsenal, by far, was that I now knew that she was extremely inflammatory. I could set her off with the smallest of actions, all while keeping my cool and appearing to do nothing wrong. One time, I coughed as she walked away from the service bar. She thought I called her a name. Instant meltdown. Runs screaming to the manager. One time, I poured her service bar ticket, but left the last beer sitting under the tap instead of on the service bar. Instant meltdown. Runs screaming to the manager. One time, I said her name quietly under my breath, so only she could hear it. Then, I pretended like I didn't say anything. Instant meltdown. Runs screaming to the manager. The real key was to wait for a night when she was already in a bad mood, then do it 2 or 3 times in a row. Then wait a few weeks and do it again. That way, it looked like she was just being a child and taking it out on me since she already had beef with me. It worked like a charm. She got worse shifts, worse sections, and, in turn, worse tips. As her frustration grew, so did her outbursts. Eventually, she got fired for threatening to have her boyfriend beat me up. Within earshot of a manager. Fired on the spot. Check and mate. The whole process took about 5 months. Was it petty? Yes. Was it childish and passive-aggressive? Absolutely. Was it all over $4? Yep. Was it satisfying? Oh, it was so satisfying. I wish OP had done an estimate of how much the coworker had lost over the months, but if I had to guess, we're probably talking thousands of dollars. Maybe even tens of thousands if it's over the course of 5 months. She really should have just let OP take the $4. Our next Reddit post is from Maudzit. 2 months ago, I lent some what I thought were friends $700. They came to me begging to help them out to catch up on bills, specifically on their car loan. They told me they were 2 months behind on it and didn't want it repossessed. So, me being the gullible, soft touch I am, I lent them the money. Now, they promised to pay me back $233 per month for 3 months until I was fully paid back. Note, I didn't even charge them interest. Well, it came the first month, and guess what? Yep, no payment to me. They came up with this really half-baked excuse that they were behind on other bills now too. So the next day, I take a drive to their apartment to discuss this with them. What do I see when I walk in their living room? A frickin' brand new 52-inch LED smart TV mounted on the wall. At first, I didn't say anything about the TV. I asked them why they backed out of our agreements to pay me back, and I got the same excuse. We're really backed up on our other bills and have been paying those off too. This is when I pointed out the brand new TV and said, well, what the hell is that new TV? And last month when I was here, that wasn't there. The answer I got floored me. They told me, it's none of your effing business what we spend our money on, and that they would start paying me back next month. I was fuming so much, I just walked out and went home. Well, I thought to myself, I'll give them to next month to see if they start paying me. Well, next month came, and guess what? Another BS excuse. This time, it was that their dog got sick and they had vet bills to pay. Now, I was effing pissed off and in full revenge mode. I drove over to their place late at night, 3 in the morning, and wrote down their VIN number on their car and their license plate number. The next day, I started calling car repo companies to see if that car was up for repossession. Well, guess what? It was. Those lying buttholes never made a payment on their car for over 5 months, I found out. The woman I spoke to was nice enough to tell me who the lien holder was. I then told her I knew where the car was, and I was willing to let them know for a finder's fee. They agreed to a $250 finder's fee. I met with the repo agent 3 days later and showed him where the car was, and he handed me $250, and then went and hooked up their car and hauled it away. Meanwhile, I was sitting in the tow truck the entire time. Next thing I see is those lying buttholes come flying out of their apartment screaming at the tow truck driver that they can't take their car away, that they were all caught up on their payments. This is when I stepped out of the tow truck and they saw me and I said to them, BS, you're caught up. I spoke to your lien holder and you're over 5 months behind. And this is what you get for lying to me and ripping me off, you douchebags. That was r/Prorevenge, and if you like this content, check out my podcast where I publish the exact same episodes. Also, hit that subscribe button because I put out new Reddit videos every single day.